Greetings, I'm Suzanne Tidkemeyer. I worked for a place called Pathos for 10 years, doing a column called No Longer Quivering. It was about the quiverful evangelical movement. It was about so many different ministries, and one of the ones that I talked about was No Greater Joy, Debi and Michael Pearl's ministry. Today I'm going to talk about a book that Debi Pearl has written, Create a Better Brain Through Neuroplasticity. I did a review of it last week, a few chapters. I'm continuing on. This is part dos. And it's an interesting one because Debi makes a lot of false claims about children and what children need. And some of the claims, as far as I'm concerned, should be criminal. So let's get started. These are just my opinions. Don't believe what I'm going to talk about, but I know you guys won't. I have the best viewers ever, so thank you for joining me. Okay, so Debi goes on to claim in this newest part of the book about music. Okay, music is a beneficial thing for children. We learn all sorts of things from music. We learn a sense of rhythm. We process it through different parts of our brain. It is a good thing for children to be exposed to music and to participate in music, even if it doesn't mean learning an instrument. Debi starts by making a number of claims about classical music and other types of music that have actually been debunked. So she starts off talking about how all little children develop perfect pitch because mama and daddy have exposed them to quality music all the way back into the uterus. Dear Debi, all babies are born with perfect pitch, scientifically proven. The tricky part is keeping it afterwards, because once you start interacting with language, when you start processing language in your brain and you start talking, that perfect pitch starts to go away. It starts around 8 months and continues on from there. It has more to do with how we develop and process language in our brains than any amount of exposure to good, bad, or indifferent music. There are websites and methods that claim to train your child to have perfect pitch, but it's with mixed success at best. No one really knows why some people keep their perfect pitch while others lose it completely. The jury is still out on brain training for infants to retain their perfect pitch abilities. I'm sorry, but it is. This entire chapter was about making your children listen to the right kind of music, and play musical instruments to raise their IQ scores. And the jury is still out on all of this. I thought it was true, but once I started looking and when doing my review of this book, I found out that after years of making those claims, there have been a few recent researchers that say it's not the music per se that's increasing the IQ, it's the exercise of the brain and the effort you extend in learning the music that causes the IQ boost more than any actual music itself. There are benefits, just not entirely the ones that Debi's claiming in the book. Interestingly enough, the type of music preferred by people with high IQs tends to skew towards instrumental music. Instrumental, no vocals. Debi does mention quality music a number of times, and she mentions Mozart as an example. Now, I love classical music, and I love Mozart, but I don't labor under any falsehood that makes me think I'm better or smarter than anybody else because I occasionally listen to classical music. So what is quality music? Debi never really says, but considering that Debi and Michael have talked about hymns and classical music and a put down Christian rock and roll, I would probably state that it's probably the hymns and the classical music. So she doesn't actually mention the evil demonic rock and roll, the devil's playground. She's just all about the Mozart here, the right kind of music. And she makes claims that the wrong kind of music, or even white noise like a fan blowing, can permanently damage the hearing of a child and damage their brain. That's so funny because I can't sleep if I don't have a fan blowing on me. Many people find the white noise of a fan to be very beneficial. It's something that a lot of us like. So I think it's probably not damaging anyone's hearing. She makes a bunch of claims about how music creates 10 zillion new roads in your brain. She's got this theory about roads in your brain making roads, instead of saying just connections or rewiring your brain. She also claims that you can rewire, reroute the roads in the brain after stroke using music. I can tell you as a stroke victim, this is not true. If that was true, I would be completely healed by now because I have been involved with music here where I am in Costa Rica. I've been on worship teams, I've sung with bands, and that's not true. And I listen to music all the time. It's just not true. It might be partially true that it is beneficial, but not in the ways that she's claiming. The jury is still out, and the science is not established well yet on any of this. If you Google rewiring your brain after a stroke, it's just not there. Just not there at all. The rest of the chapter is Debbie bragging about how she made her children outstanding, exceptional, ubermensch individuals by her constant, quote, training of them. She goes as far as to claim by using noises or clicks, she trained her babies to go to the potty on the toilet right after they all started walking. I do not believe that is true. I've used click training on my parrots in the past. Click training is really good with animals. I don't think I would use that on children. What I have heard about is that mothers that train their babies to go on the toilet, to go on the potty at a very early age, are many times just figuring out the cues the child gives out right before he goes. So it's not the child being trained, it's the parent being trained. And I think that's what's going on here. She doesn't understand that training is that those sort of things are not so much training as they are brain development. They're developmental milestones in the child. No matter how much the mama might want to stop diapering the kid in an early age, it's not going to happen until the physical development is there. Experts agree that 18 months old is about the youngest you might be able to get your child reasonably toilet trained. And a lot of kids walk well before that, but they're not able to be trained. Now I've seen kids have been trained earlier than that too, so there are always exceptions to every rule. But I think to count on that at that age is just ridiculous. And she went on to claim that she trained one of her daughters to deal with her own dyslexia by using sand table play. She doesn't explain how sand table play helped her daughter deal with her dyslexia, but it seems more likely that as much as they talk about disciplining their child with a 1/4-inch plastic plumbing line, that it was likely the child hid the dyslexia as much as possible from the parent after that. I would think that's more likely than any amount of training out of it. And then we arrive here at this very familiar place in Pearl World. And I quote, cell phone usage or excessive viewing with small screens can disrupt development of peripheral vision. The lack of normal peripheral vision is a handicap that can often be avoided. And this, when children are allowed to disengage from society and spend hours Focused on a digital screen, their brains are being left idle. The offensive noises and psychedelic flashing colors that emit from the screen are unhealthy. Brain cells cannot be produced in a brainless entertainment. Oh, brother, let the festival of cell phone and tablet bashing begin. Now, we're not going to want to sit our kids at a young age in front of those things. There's no doubt about that. But as any parent of a toddler who's had to go to the bathroom can tell you, there are going to be times when you're going to stick that tablet in front of the toddler and let them watch parts of Frozen for the millionth time just so you can go to the bathroom in peace. There are going to be those times, and it's unrealistic to think there could not be those times. Debbie follows all this with idiotic claims that watching SpongeBob SquarePants can harm your child's brain. She cites an experiment involved watching SpongeBob versus a PBS educational children's television show, or drawing with pencils or crayons or whatever on a piece of paper. After a mere 9 minutes, she claims children lost the ability to focus or remember. She cited a journal I was not able to find when I did my research for this review. I was not able to find any evidence that this was an actual study at all. Here's her quote on this. It is crucial to understand that a child's intellect, as well as his soul, will not develop into anything more than what is poured into him. Okay, so you are going to want to give your children some good things. But here's the thing. It's more than just what they're viewing. It's a lot of different things. It is what you're exposing them to, good and bad. It is what you're feeding them. It's just too many things for her to issue a hard and fast rule like that. Debbie calls SpongeBob the Cheetos of mental food, unquote. Then claims that kids that watch cartoons all end up obese. That is a bold claim. I guess because they aren't fed animal feed, that makes Debbie sure they're all getting fat. And I have to tell you the animal feed story if you're not familiar with Debi Pearl. Hold on, let me get a drink of Diet Coke for this one. In the early days of Michael and Debi Pearl's ministry, when Michael was in an early pastorateship, they had people gifting them food because they were in a very poor place with not much income, and an old farmer gave them a bunch of feed corn. Okay, they also got a bunch of dented, rusted tin cans that Debbie's not sure if they were cat food or tuna, which blows my mind because I feed my cat canned food and I can easily tell the difference between animal grade tuna for cats and human grade tuna for humans. It's not that hard. It's not that complex. So Debbie ground that feed corn up, that seed corn, ground it up, cooked it in all kinds of different ways for family, and fed them all winter on the seed corn. It never dawned on her to get a part-time job. It never dawned on her to figure out other ways to make money or to cut expenses. It was just grumble about everything they were given by their very poor congregation in this very poor rural place, and then use what they were given most ungratefully. And right after that, Debbie shames mothers by claiming that your own moods will stop your children's brain from developing correctly. I find her bashing of all cartoons, but especially SpongeBob SquarePants, to be pretty funny. Why? Do you know my husband used in his teaching Costa Rican 4, 5, and 6-year-olds English in a rural school is SpongeBob. He used a SpongeBob, as they called him here. Baba Sponja, I'm sorry, I got it backwards. Baba Sponja. To teach English. And it was a good way to teach English to native Spanish speakers in Costa Rica of a very young age because they were familiar with Baba Sponja. And it allowed him to connect with them and teach them English. It was a good way. And those kids weren't stupid. Their brains weren't warped. They are just kids from another culture that got something from American culture used to teach them English. My kids are grown. They're all pretty successful and independent, all for their own, yet they all watch SpongeBob as kids. Deb, this is not a hill you want to die in this early in your stupid book. And I think about all the good brain building content out there available freely on the digital world, from memory improving games to cartoons that teach people and children how to code. And I laugh. The next chapter, Debbie started out with another pile of lies and wishful thinking. She says that all of our brains are moldable plastic till the day we die. She starts caterwauling about brain grooving, which is repetitiveness that creates habits in the brain, or groove in the brain, she's trying to say. And says that babies like Janessa Rodriguez have nothing to fear because time will wipe their brain damage out to replace it with healthy brain function using brain grooving. Now, I kind of dispute that. Now, you can fix things, a lot of things, with a 30-day habit. You purposely break one of your habits for 30 days, and it goes from being something you're purposely doing to something that's automated, something automatic that your brain goes to every time. There's a lot of truth to that, but I've spent a lot of time talking to my neurologist post-strokes about neuroplasticity. And it doesn't work the way she's saying. It doesn't always work, sadly enough. I still haven't learned how to all the time balance 100% without using a mobility aid. And God knows I try, and I've been through enough physical therapy. So then Debbie brings on a supposed physical therapist, which I've run this woman's name, and I can't find that she actually holds any kind of legitimate physical therapy degree or that she is a license anywhere. And this woman goes on to bash American academics for not enough physical playtime. She throws shade at our government and parents that dare to schedule music lessons and sports. This book contradicts itself so many times, so many stupid things. This all reads like Debbie has no idea that many schools now have incorporated physical activity, PT, movement, and play throughout the day. Some places have realized that their boys need to get up and move around. My husband found that when he was teaching English to younger kids, he found that the group of boys between 7 to about 10 needed to get up and move at various points in the lesson, or they were going to stop listening, and he put that into action. So schools now recognize that some kids learn better after physical activity or fidgeting or using a hands-on activity instead of sitting quietly to read or listen. So Debbie just spends the better part of 2 chapters singing the praises of a child learning a musical instrument and decides to throw out what she said. Plus, this therapist is talking about the importance of physical activity, yet bashing organized sports. Oh my, it's a mental twister, stupid time here. Debbie's expert goes on to bash any sort of screen activity, claiming that she treats teens with very bad posture from video games that she only sees in the extremely elderly who have degenerative discs. I'm guessing that this physical therapist has never seen, or Debbie has ever never seen Dance Dance Revolution or any of the highly physical video games. My son plays this crazy game where he puts on a virtual reality headset and we see him over there doing like this. He's skiing, he's riding his snowboard and stuff. And we just laugh because it looks so silly, but he is sweating buckets by the time he finishes. So it's actually a lie that there's no physical activity in all video games. There are some that are actually good for physical activity. It's not all just sitting around staring at the screen like a bumper stunned deer, eating Cheetos and getting fat. The faux expert cites Romanian orphanages and monkeys to state that one must primarily play, and if you don't play, you end up with, quote, violent teens, monkey teens, Romanian teens. I have to dispute that. There is no evidence that I could find that the Romanians, and this is a tragic situation in Romania, where parents could not afford to feed their children, so they were turning them over to the orphanages. There is zero evidence that those Romanian children who became teens in these orphanages were any more or less violent than anyone else. And I can tell you from having observed monkeys up close and personal, because we have monkeys in the backyard every day, that there's no way to stop a baby monkey from playing that I've seen. The mothers come down about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and take a nap in our Matapalo tree. And the babies don't nap. They run around and play with each other. And it's the cutest thing you have ever seen. Debbie follows this up with bashing any toy you might ever buy for your child. She doesn't like toys. She says no toys, just sticks, rocks, and pine cones to stimulate creativity. Yes, she mentions all three of those as toys. Ridiculous, huh? She then talks about the no toy thing to illustrate her point by taking her young children to go play in a waterfall that is part of the spring they get their drinking water from. You know, if you're letting your kids in diapers play in a waterfall that is upstream from where you pull your water from, guess what? You're all going to come down with all kinds of stomach problems. It is a good way to contaminate your water supply and make everybody sick. It's a very bad idea. There are a few other bad added ideas that the expert chimes in on. One of them, she says you should only put your baby to sleep on his stomach because that's how brains are developed. No evidence, no research to back this. She dismisses all the concerns of the pediatricians and the American Medical Association with their back sleeping only policy as fear mongering. Hello, crib death. And we waste another couple of ideas on the idea that you could only develop your brain if you're running around playing barefoot, that shoes inhibit a child's ability to brain groove and grow that brain. Nary a mention of nails, glass, any of the things nasty things that can bring on massive infection or tetanus. And promoting possible tetanus producing behavior while hating on vaccines should really be criminal, along with sleeping on your stomach as a newborn baby. So this is a Fruit Looped idiotic individual she's consulted that likely has a degree from some sort of non-legitimate source. Very popular in Quiverful to consult those types of people. That chapter was particularly stupid and short, thank God. Debbie started the next chapter with this quote: Neuroplasticity has taught us that we can literally damage and retard our children's brains' structure, or we can enhance it by what we allow or disallow in their lives. Yeah, like beating the crap out of your kids with a 1/4-inch plumbing line is not going to damage their brain. Debbie goes on to explain that neurons in the brain are like a telephone system. And suddenly we're back to her oversimplification of neurotransmitters before she leapfrogs to memory and pictures. I just have to quote another part of Debi's book here. Keep in mind as I'm reading this that Debi is talking about herself learning state capitals with this picture learning as an adult. Seems to indicate she didn't know her state capitals beforehand. I do remember the capitals of most states of this country because the author created pictures in my mind to help me remember those details. Does Debi have brain damage? For example, the state of Pennsylvania, he said to think of a man holding a pencil in his hand who was getting a haircut while eating a burger. The pencil is to remind me of pencil from Pennsylvania. His hair is hair, and the burger is Berg, both from Harrisburg. Sure, Debi, whatever you say, you read this book as an adult, not as a child. Even if it used this rather simplistic method I have seen taught to children, I learned those same factoids in music lessons, music theory lessons to be exact. We studied a piece of music written to commemorate the founding of the great state of Pennsylvania. Debi does not seem to realize that different learning styles happen for different kinds of people. There's no one wrong or right way to do it. Then Debi turns around and proves yet again she's possibly not the most educated nut to follow the tree she's using. Debi starts out by throwing shade at a 3-year-old she calls Roger, who will not look adults in the eye. She throws out some more garbage about intellect, emotions, physical activities, and screens while bashing Roger again, saying that he is a screen junkie. And that is why he is so sensitive and stupid. Then she does a mental gyration over to Baby Sue, linking pleasure, music, and training your children to sit still. Which is another bit of hypocrisy. Which is it, activity or stillness? I'm getting very confused here about her words. Then we arrive at the Pearls talking about training their kids to behave in church by providing toys, crayons, and more blathering about building their brains. Let's be real here. Everything the Pearls have said in other books up until this point advises whipping the heck out of any disobedience of any child in church. So I'm not believing this pencils and crayons and activities thing in church. But I have to agree with this one Debi quote from the book because I found it to be so true for myself and others that struggle to stay focused while listening to someone else drone on, like in church. In former days, I remember that many of the ladies brought their knitting to church. I've never seen that. The preacher knew they were listening much better than the hypnotized people staring at him as he spoke. That's very true. To this day, I cannot watch television without my hands having crocheting or some other activity in them. I just can't. I can't concentrate on what's being said. Same thing with sermons. I have to have something I'm manipulating. And every pastor of every church I've been to, I've said, it may look to you like I'm not paying attention, but I actually am. It's just the way my brain is wired. Debi goes on to claim this is for everyone. No, Debi, this is not for everyone. This is why fidget cubes and handheld computer games, video games, are godsend for some people, not everyone. Some people must have something to manipulate in their hands to activate active listening. Science has proven it. She makes some crazy claims about Michael Pearl. Sermons to kids have created pastors. Then she throws disdain and hate at parents that force their kids to go to church but do not attend. And then she bashes church nursery and says you should never allow your child to attend. And here we are again, a quote from the book. A recent study of more than 2,600 toddlers showed that for every hour of TV the toddlers watched each day, their chances of developing serious attachment-ish difficulties by the age of 7 was increased by 10%. For every hour, she's claiming this, the 10%. I've seen nothing to indicate that in any study I've ever seen. Then she says, TV watching correlates with brain problems. You know, Debbie covered this 2 chapters ago too, but here we are again. The study that she's referencing was created in not the most scientific way by asking mothers to evaluate the children's behavior post-television watching. And the conclusion was actually a lower percentage than what she's saying here. Scientists and pediatricians have said the study is meaningless by the way that the research took place, which means you shouldn't pay any attention to it. Of course, the entire issue of screens and attention is a complex one, and more complex than anything that Debbie talks about here. It's probably not a good idea to allow your small children unlimited screen time, but some screen time in a way with the parent can really be beneficial, I think. Debbie warns you not to allow your toddler to have his neurons overstimulated by screens, flashing lights and loud noises before telling you to keep stimulating him to grow his neurons. Flip and flop and twister again. Now, I will throw a caution in here. You may not want your child around screens that flash because there is evidence that it can trigger epilepsy if that's already in there. But the percentage of children with epilepsy is actually pretty small, and you would probably know before then. She moved on to gut health, hating on antibiotics by claiming gut health is brain health. No, they're linked, but not like she's trying to say here. Vaccines are the evil too, according to her. More brain pruning, babbling, and gut health mixed in a crazy fashion. Now, what is brain pruning? She talks about brain pruning along with brain grooving and the roadways in your brain, and says that bad things that you're letting your kid do, prune back what's there. The righteous things you're doing, grow those roads. So she starts this chapter of her big book of Bad Brains, Create a Better Brain Through Neuroplasticity, talking about executive function in this chapter. Debbie claims this is the best piece of training you can give a child, the ability to make executive decisions, to exercise that executive function. Too bad she didn't take her own advice in raising her daughters not to have meltdowns when confronted with the choice of restaurant to eat at or clothing to buy. She describes it like this: paying attention, organizing and planning, initiating tasks and staying focused on them, staying on task without prompting or oversight, regulating all of your emotions, self-monitoring and keeping track of what it is you're doing. In other words, everything that we've seen that Michael Pearl is not. She goes on to claim that IQ and book smarts do not matter and will not get you ahead, but executive function will. Not understanding that both of those things tend to interact and work together. Quote, experience shows that success is often based more on attitude and less on ability. Nope. Debbie goes on to make an even more ludicrous claim in light of everything we know about the Pearls and the Pearl children. Quote, interpersonal effectiveness is dependent upon our ability to manage the emotions of others. Unquote. This is all followed with talk of social skills being everything and teaching a child to regulate their feelings. Her words devolve into personal stories with examples of kids melting down at various times over a wide variety of circumstances, with Debbie claiming none of those kids have been taught to regulate their emotions by executive function, and that parents allowing such outbursts are brain grooving their kids right into the bad, dire things. Well, first of all, with children, meltdowns occur primarily in times of great frustration. If your child is having a meltdown, there's frustration there. And a lot of times it helps, I've found, to start questioning the child what they're so frustrated with and help them manage their emotion that way, figure out what's going on, talk to them about it, and go there. But there are also kids that are toddlers that can't be reasoned with that are just doing that. And that's part of their development. It just is. And the best thing you can do is try and manage their emotions that way, making them feel heard and understood. She follows all this with talk with social skills being everything, and teaching a child to regulate their feelings is everything. Again, she talks about this. Debi illustrates her point with a scientific experiment that she declines to name the study. She doesn't name the organization running the test. There's no identifiable information on the study. I tried looking it up and didn't find it. Long, fake, dumb story shortened. They told a teacher that 5 of her students had genius level IQs. She taught them all year, and at the end of the year, she told that those kids were merely average. They only performed to a high standard because they've been expected to perform to that high standard. Well, I think it's important that schools encourage kids to do their best work ever. I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or not. Then we move on to a next Pearl bugaboo, impulse control. Another thing that seems to be lacking in all of Debi Pearl's tales about her husband, Michael. He seems to have some of the worst impulse control I've ever observed in a human male. Quote, how does learning delayed gratification translate to adulthood? Self-control helps a cigarette smoker lay down his habit because he knows it is bad for him. It causes compulsive shoppers to stop sooner rather than later. It means gambling, overspending, and poor eating habits will not be a problem in their lives. It plays a role in controlling anger, lust, and depression. Well, isn't that special? And just like that, we're back at the famous Stanford Marshmallow Experiment, which I have to talk about before I read the next part, okay? It has to. But I have to explain it first because you won't get how wrong her words are until you know what it was. The Stanford Marshmallow Experiment was primarily done during the 1970s. It wasn't only done then, it still continues to this day, but the primary research took place in those 10 years, and it's not quite as clear cut as Debi tries to make it claim. And pretzels and cookies were also used besides marshmallows, so it wasn't always a marshmallow. What they found in the early versions, the ones Debi is talking about, the results were skewed. The data favored children from wealthier households as having the best delayed gratification response, because that's what it was. It was all about if children were capable of delayed gratification responses. Accounting for the socioeconomics and the other factors where the test was rerun, it was determined that only half the kids waited for delayed gratification. There are also significant racial and cultural differences as well as socioeconomic in this thing. Also keep in mind the experiment never took place in a classroom. It was run worldwide in a controlled laboratory setting. The participants in the first test were between the ages of 3 and 5 years old, an age group not particularly known for perfect self-control. Debi said, this year, when they did the same test, most of the children demanded a marshmallow immediately Only a few lone children sat patiently waiting. So the way the test was done was they offered the children a marshmallow right then or two marshmallows in 5 or 10 minutes, and studied which kids said yes or no and at what point and the different behavioral things. And we follow that up. Debbie says an out and out lie about the test. Watts, Duncan, and Kwan's 2018 conceptual replication yielded mostly statistically insignificant correlations with behavioral problems, but a significant correlation with achievement tests at 15 years old. These effects were lower than in the original experiment and reduced further when controlling for early cognitive ability and behavior, family background, and home environment. Liar, liar, pants on fire. I dread to think what Debbie would make of the Milgram experiment if she's mangling this very basic thing so hard. More Debbie. Why were the results so different this year compared to 50 years ago? And what makes one child frantic to get a marshmallow immediately while another child can sit and watch others eat and not be moved? Neuroplasticity not only teaches us why, it teaches us how we can all become self-disciplined to the point that it is not even a struggle or a sacrifice to wait our turn. Our brains can actually wire, quote, to feel, quote, differently about things. Neuroplasticity. It is said that things that fire together wire together. That means the more you respond to a certain way, fire, the more your brain is wired to stay that way until you naturally respond to certain things the same way each time. Obviously, in a few years, parents instill those qualities into their children more than they do in today's world. But that's not all what the study showed. There are better results in more stable families and in families with better socioeconomic situation. But this was not worldwide of give me that marshmallow nowism that she's trying to claim. This is why a teeny bit of knowledge mixed with a pile of falsehoods and an uneducated person giving out advice willy-nilly is so incredibly dangerous. This is how we get to the point where real science is debased and not believed by the average Joe in this world. This gives us people like all the COVID deniers and those that think that climate change is not real. This is how ignorant people end up in positions of power. Debbie says this. Now, how about you? Could you resist the marshmallow? You can test yourself today while we are out on the beach doing lifeguard training. You know the leaders will provide all the snacks for free. She's talking about her grandchildren going out. A child whose brain is grooved in executive function will have access to the same unlimited amount of snacks as a child who is lacking executive skills. When you go through the line, will you pile on as much as possible on your tray, or you make a decision to only get what you think your body needs to function at best? Keep in mind, every time you make a decision to do more self-control, you are building a better brain that will naturally cause you to continue the right thing. It's far better than winning a contest. Okay, so this was all from an article she wrote about the book. So when I did my review, I skipped all of this because I'd already written about it. So I had to go back and explain what the test was. So here we go. This is what I said in the book. It was an advertorial piece she wrote, a piece designed to look like editorial content that was actually an advertisement for the book. She used her grandchildren and some silly story about marshmallows and lifeguard snacks to make a point. Debbie whips up an unlikely scenario from thin air just to promote the book. One afternoon, I was sitting on my couch talking with 3 grandchildren while we waited to leave for the beach where they were going to compete in the lifeguard contest. One of them asked me what neuroplasticity meant, and what my new book was about. This is how she's using that to say that about the kids going to the beach and knowing not to pile their plates. I don't think so. Oh, so she goes on and explains the things that she's explained earlier. And none of this is what neuroplasticity is about. It's not about the marshmallow experiment. It's not about her misunderstanding of it. It's not about any of that. Nothing to do with that at all. And she doesn't take any kind of care to explain the different factors that impact this. It's all just kids that haven't been trained will take a marshmallow right away instead of waiting for the two. I'm going to explain to you another reason why kids may have taken a marshmallow at the beginning that she has glossed over. And this has to do with kids that are in food insufficiency. I guarantee you, if you ran this test on the Rodriguez kids, they would take one marshmallow right away instead of waiting for the two. Why? If you are in a household with food insecurity, if you're in a household where your parents don't prioritize you, if you're in a household where you learn you can't trust anything coming out of the mouth of an adult, guess what? You're going to grab that one marshmallow. You're going to grab that one marshmallow and eat that one marshmallow rather than wait, because your life has taught you that adults are never to be trusted. Never. And it's better to have the one marshmallow that you can look and see and smell and eat right now than it is to wait for a marshmallow pie in the sky. And that's a sad state of being. Okay, I'm going to end this here. I'm getting breathless again, and I'm beginning to want to do harm to Debbie. And I know that's never good. When I start thinking about, if I could just get you alone in a bedroom with the same switch you're using on kids, it would be the best thing ever. That's a bad place for me to go in my head. I don't like it. I'm not a violent person. I don't believe in any kind of physical violence. I don't believe in harming children in this way. But I also don't believe in lying. And a lot of this book is either lying or misunderstanding everything. Okay, you guys, I'm going to take my yoga pants self, wearing self out, and have some lunch. You have a great rest of your Friday.